section 6.1 is about post-revolution America and the beginning of the United States. We're going to look at the political ideology of the time and some terms that will help us understand more of how our country was founded. So the first thing for the American political ideal, Americans embrace the Republican idea. Representative democracy, meaning everyone has a say and everyone gets a vote in how the government is going to run. Property holding white males, however, are the only ones who get a vote. They're the only ones who get a say in who gets to decide how America is run. States will write constitutions to protect their rights as individuals. They believe that they need to protect themselves from anything that the national government might do to violate their rights. If a state doesn't believe that the federal government is doing the right thing by them, they feel that they have the right to push back against that. It granted limited authority to those governments as well. In the beginning, a lot of rights are going to be given to that of the states versus that of the national government. Some terms you need to know is democracy is a form of government in which all eligible citizens have an equal say in the decisions that affect their lives. The general public votes in elections to choose those leaders. And because of that, everyone gets a say in who they are. And in the beginning, it really meant all white men, not anyone else. Republicanism is the head of state is not elected because of their fathers. So it's not hereditary, but they're elected by other means. A government entrusted to virtuous leaders, elected for their superior knowledge and talents and commitment to the public good. In the beginning, we wanted to establish ourselves as a democratic republic. People should be governed by elected representatives, meaning giving everyone equal opportunity to prosper. Therefore, the government exists to protect liberties and to promote the public good. With all of this post-revolution, we have a social revolution that will happen in which the wealthy want wealthy in power. They don't want the poor in power. This idea of democracy that they set up for everyone to follow, they did that to get people to participate in the war. Now that the war is over, they don't want that anymore. They want individuals to give them more power, that power back, and so they can do more with it. The Loyalists will flee to Canada and the Caribbean. As you can see here, Canada in the orange and the Caribbean down here. They're going to flee to these areas to get away from just the harsh treatment that they will get after the American Revolution. The government will then seize their property that is left and they're going to sell it. The Treaty of Paris 1783, there were provisions within it that said we weren't going to do that, but the U.S. government does it anyway. After the revolution, they want people, the people want a clear separation of church and state. They fear abuse of power. They have seen what happens with that of Catholicism and the Vatican being the Pope being very, very involved in a lot of monarchies, so they don't want that to happen. And with the Anglican Church as well, since it is run by the King of England. So they have this fear that religion will rule everything. And we have this rise of this group of individuals that are not religious, not part of an organized religion. So they want a separation of church and state in the beginning. Virginia is going to be the first state that is going to look at their state specifically and set up what they're going to do with it. It's drafted, the Virginia Declaration of Rights is drafted in 1776 and adopted in June of 1776, prior to the beginning of the American Revolution. Because remember, war is not declared until June 14th, so it's 2 days beforehand. Guaranteed religious freedom in the state of Virginia is drafted by George Mason, who's the individual pictured here. James Madison will assist him with the section on religious freedom. It rejected the notion of a privileged political class or hereditary offices, meaning everybody should be able to have the ability to be part of government. Well, all white men. It describes the moral principles upon which the government should run, including the right to rebel against inadequate government, meaning they put in their state constitution the ability to push back against the federal government, so that if anything were to happen that had happened prior to the American Revolution, then the state of Virginia themselves can push back and not be part of it. Slavery in the new nation. Slavery is going to remain as part of that of the United States. There's strong support for slavery to be intact. Many of our founding fathers are slave owners. Of our first 12 presidents, only one of them is not a slave owner. Whether they agreed with slavery or not, they were slave owners. So it's not something they're going to dismantle right away. It's a big economic part of the United States, so they're going to keep it. In the South, Southern whites say the Revolution was all about war to defend slavery, when it wasn't. The American Revolution obviously was a war to gain independence from Great Britain. They have no intention in giving women more freedom either. They prefer to keep them oppressed and subservient just like they were before. When it comes to diplomacy, after the Revolution, Spain closed the Mississippi River to use. The nation almost went bankrupt, so they cannot afford this to happen. What they really need to do is they need the Mississippi River to keep goods flowing, to keep things going, because Britain has done a situation where they've started impressment. Impressment is where the British Navy will stop a ship, an American ship, and they'll board it. And if they see anyone that they perceive to be that of British, then what they're going to do is they're going to force them into the British Navy. And that isn't something that a lot of people want to do, because when you're forced into the British Navy, that means going forward you have to serve 30 years in the British Navy. That's not something they're going to want to do. And it didn't matter if you were a patriot or not, if you declared that you're now a U.S. citizen, if they thought you were British, you were going to be in the Navy. The British Navy is then going to blockade Americans from all ports coming from British-controlled Caribbean. So the United States is going to put an extra tax on imported goods from England. Money is very scarce. There's still no stable national currency. There are 3 banks that we have in the United States: Philadelphia, New York City, and Boston. So if you're south of Philadelphia, you're going to have a little bit of a problem getting funds and things that you need. There is a gathering crisis in that of the new United States. Growing fears that democratic ideals are going to undermine the social and economic elite, because the elite don't want to give up any power. They want to keep as much power as they have. So the poor and the middle class no longer defer to the wealthy, because now they've got some independence. They've got that feeling of democracy that was pushed all throughout the revolution for nearly 10 years. So they are going to want to govern themselves. They have fear that the upper class fears the masses are gaining too much power. And so to pay for the war and to keep the poor and the middle class down, they're going to raise taxes on them to 3 times that of the pre-war amounts. And of course, the wealthy isn't going to pay more. It's just that of the lower classes. One of the things that's going to come out of that, there's going to be one person that's going to push back against that, and that's Daniel Shays. Daniel Shays was an individual in western Massachusetts. Shays Rebellion is going to involve 3 rural counties in which the authorities there have begun to seize property, seize farms, seize cattle to pay for back taxes. They're going to demand, Daniel Shays and his people are going to demand more paper money to be printed so they can pay their taxes. That's not going to happen. So armed farmers are going to band together to force judges and sheriffs to stop property seizures. Daniel Shays being their leader. He was a war veteran, and he led a march to Springfield, Massachusetts. Unfortunately, when they get there, they're going to meet that of the militia, and it's going to fall apart relatively quickly. Nothing really happens. There's no aggression, but it is a kind of a statement at that time that they're not going to put up with all this that is going on. So they're going to try their best to keep from having any other issues come about. They're not going to get very far because they're poor and they're middle class, and the wealthy still hold power. That is the end of this slide presentation. So you're going to move on to 6.2.